The era of the Great Depression was also the era of the American gangster. Notables included Bonnie and Clyde and Pretty Boy Floyd, yet none was more notorious than Indiana's own John Dillinger. Welcome to another edition of Hoosier History. I'm Rick Maultra. The legend of John Dillinger lasts longer than his 31 years of a short and violent life, and in less than 14 months of crime, he had become America's most wanted. Even the most adorable baby can turn outlaw and become public enemy number one. Born June 22, 1903 in the Brightwood section of Indianapolis, John Dillinger, or Dillinger as the family preferred, was the son of John Dillinger Sr. and his wife Molly. 3 years later she died, and young John's upbringing was now in the hands of his sister Audrey, a responsibility that she never relinquished. His father owned a grocery store at 2210 Bloyd Avenue, and little Johnny, sitting here in the carriage, often went with his father on deliveries. Attending school number 38 in Oak Hill, Dillinger was an average student who rarely caused trouble. In 1920, after John Sr. had remarried, the Dillingers bought a 60-acre farm in Mooresville. Young John did not have the love for the land that his father toiled so hard over. Instead, he involved himself with the youthful hijinks that was indicative of things to come. Boyhood friend Delbert Hobson recalls the early trouble that he and young John shared in.
Well, a little place up here on this farm up north here was a watermelon patch. And we'd go steal watermelons every night or two until we got caught, and he rushed and he crawled through the fence and cut his leg right wide open here. John carried a book with him, and Jesse James was his idol. Well, I went away to college in 1928, and John had begun wearing a cap on the side of his head, and I knew that was no good. He was going bad right then.
He was attended Sunday school, and of course our Sunday school boys would always play after Saturdays and after school, and we would he would always want to be the individual to choose the team, and he would tell what position that he wanted to play himself. That showed that he was headstrong or bossy, and as he always wanted to have the first say.
Dillinger appeared to be a restless and impatient young man. He quit school at 16 and worked various jobs, not staying particularly long at any. Yet all of his employers described him as industrious and honest. On the evening of July 21st, 1923, 20-year-old John stole a car from a church parking lot to joyride in Indianapolis. He was found out, although the car's owners never pressed charges. An unbelieving Dillinger panicked and signed up for the Navy to escape arrest. He was assigned to the USS Utah, and within months became a deserter. Soon he returned to Mooresville and settled back into his old groove of baseball and pool halls. He married Burl Hovius, who met John when he was playing ball in Martinsville, her hometown. Eventually, the young couple had their own apartment in Martinsville. Neighbors recalled John staying out late, and his wife would go out looking for him. He was spending his time making the acquaintance of former convict Ed Singleton, a man who forever would change the life of John Dillinger. Next to this Mooresville church, John Dillinger hid, waiting to rob grocer Frank Morgan. Ed Singleton waited in the getaway car. Leaping out and striking the old man with an iron bolt, Dillinger stood over him with a revolver demanding the money. Morgan knocked the gun away, setting it off, and Dillinger fled to the rear alley only to find the getaway car gone. Dillinger denied his involvement in the crime to authorities, but admitted to it later with his father. John Sr. told his son to throw himself at the mercy of the court. He maintained that Judge Joseph Williams had promised leniency if young John did so. Without the advisement of an attorney, he pleaded guilty to the charges, and Judge Williams sentenced Dillinger to 10 to 20 years. John was sent to the Indiana Reformatory at Pendleton and later transferred to Michigan City, where he was to receive his criminal tutelage from some real pros.
When he went to Michigan City, that's where the big-time bank robbers, the professionals, were. And they taught John everything they knew, and he was a willing student. So there's no doubt in my mind at all that when he came out of Michigan City, he intended to return to a life of crime, and that's precisely what he did.
The town was shocked, and they always felt it. It was little that John got a little bit of too much thrown at him, because his father had been advised that if he would plead guilty, he would get off better than trying to avoid it. And it didn't work out that way, and they always felt that more or less soured him on the thing.
Dillinger had spent 8.5 of his formative years behind bars. During that time, his wife divorced him, and his stepmother Lizzie died less than an hour before he finally made it back home. The world that John Dillinger returned to was vastly different to the one that he had left behind. It was the time of the Great Depression. Farms foreclosed, and there was a 25% unemployment rate. Crime was high, and Dillinger fit right in. In less than 2 weeks from being paroled, Dillinger and local hood William Shaw teamed together to knock off a supermarket in Indianapolis and drugstore in Irvington. It wasn't long before John took a liking to banks. In short order, he robbed the State Bank in Indianapolis at 812 Massachusetts. He continued his Midwest pillaging by hitting banks in Muncie, Daleville, and Montpelier, Indiana. Dillinger crossed state lines robbing a bank in Bluffton, Ohio. It is highly probable that some of these banks may have hired Dillinger to rob them to cover their Depression-era losses. His style of wearing straw hat boaters and vaulting over bank counters became his trademark.
It was John's flair. John had I don't know, just a knack for showmanship and flair. He loved to do those kind of things. And speaking with Mary Kender, it was John's idea to put hostages on the running boards. And he said, look, we'll put these people on the running boards. We don't have to shoot. They can't shoot at us. They're going to kill innocent people. And he goes, and look, everybody will be happy. And in fact, he would give those people a lot of money. He might give them $50 to $100, say, look, don't tell anybody you got this money. You got a free ride, you got a little scare, but you got a good thrill out of it, too.
Most all the bank robberies, the police were notified they came and did the best job they could under the circumstances. You've got to understand that the gang had hostages. There wasn't much the police could do. They couldn't shoot. Best they could hope for was to pursue them, and maybe till they dropped the hostages off and then get them. And of course, since the gang had them outgunned, that usually didn't happen.
Dillinger's gang was an ever-changing group of bandits. As one member was killed or arrested, another took his place. Some of the principal players included William Shaw, who met with Dillinger at Spades Park in Indianapolis to plan robberies, Harry Copeland, Homer Van Meter, and Lester Gillis, alias Babyface Nelson. Before he was paroled from Michigan City, John Dillinger had made plans to break his tutors out of jail. In September of 1933, John had smuggled in automatic weapons into the state pen for this purpose. Later that month, John himself was arrested while visiting a lady friend. He readily admitted to a bank job in Ohio so he could be taken to the little jail in Lima. Meanwhile, John's former roommates from Michigan City were busting out with the help of weapons that Dillinger had smuggled in. They were determined to pay back the favor and get John out of Lima. Handsome Harry Pierpont and his gang of Russell Clark, John Hamilton, Edward Schaus and Charles Makeley went to Lima. Pierpont shot and killed jail Sheriff Jess Sarber, and Dillinger was free again. Robbing banks like this one in Indianapolis on Massachusetts Avenue had now made John Dillinger a real-life matinee idol of crime. The Great Depression had made him a folk hero in the eyes of many, and everybody from the American Legion to the state police was now in the chase to catch him. With his half-Indian girlfriend, Billy Frechette, the Dillinger gang treks across Indiana, stealing guns and bulletproof vests from police stations in Auburn and Peru. Their arsenal satisfied, the gang robs banks in South Bend, Greencastle, and East Chicago. It is there that Dillinger is alleged to have killed Officer William O'Malley with a machine gun, a charge that Dillinger vehemently denied to even his own family.
He swore to his father that he didn't kill the bank guard in East Chicago, the East Chicago policeman. And Mary Kinder, she swore to me that he wasn't there, that she knew for a fact that he wasn't in East Chicago. They were on their way to Tucson.
There were a number of witnesses when O'Malley was killed. Of course, the police were out in the street. The hostages from the bank witnessed it. There is absolutely no question that one of the two gunmen who held up the bank that day killed Patrick O'Malley. Dillinger simply claimed it wasn't him and he hadn't been there. Unfortunately, there's no doubt in my mind that it was him.
Indiana's governor now calls out the National Guard to round up the mob. Captain Matt Leach of the Indiana State Police sets up roadblocks on major arteries, but Dillinger decides to use backcountry roads. To take the heat off themselves, the gang decides to hide out in Tucson, Arizona. It turns out to be a bad idea. The gang is caught without bloodshed. Russell Clark, Charles Makeley, and Harry Pierpont are sent to Lima, Ohio to stand trial for the murder of Sheriff Jess Sarber. Mary Kinder, Harry Pierpont's sweetheart, was also captured. Dillinger fumed that he had been arrested by a Hicktown police force. Wanted now by several states, Dillinger is flown back to Indiana to face charges for the murder of Officer O'Malley. While being shackled on the plane trip back home, Dillinger quips, "Hell, I don't jump out of these things." Security was now very high as Dillinger is driven from Chicago to the jail at Crown Point, Indiana. Dillinger had fought extradition back home and had hoped to be taken to Wisconsin, which had no death penalty. Now at the jail, Dillinger plays up to the press and poses with Sheriff Lillian Holley and Lake County Prosecutor Robert Estill, who is being groomed to run for governor. An exhausted Estill, at the request of the media, obligingly gets chummy with Dillinger as the two pose for photographers. The pictures ran on front pages all over the country, and the outcry over Estill's coziness with Dillinger shortened the prosecutor's career. Dillinger was arraigned on February 5, 1934, before Judge William Murray, who refused to allow for Dillinger's transfer to the more secure state pen at Michigan City. On March 3rd, Dillinger escaped from the Crown Point jail. It has been alleged that the judge had been paid off to smuggle a gun in, or you can believe that Dillinger whittled a gun out of wood and colored it with black shoe polish, as he gleefully boasted.
Judge Murray received money from his attorney, Louis Pickett, who was actually Al Capone's attorney. Capone was in prison at this time, but Capone, as everyone knows, was still running Chicago from prison. And there was a deal made that he would take a bribe and John would get a real gun. But John, not trusting people, went ahead and used the wooden gun. In other words, created it as an alibi that this is how I got out, to kind of cover everybody, and in case this other guy didn't show up with the payoff. But it was always pretty well known throughout the family that John escaped up there with the judge's help.
Dillinger and fellow fugitive Herbert Youngblood left the jail with 2 hostages and added salt to the wound by stealing Sheriff Lillian Holly's car to make their getaway. Crossing the Illinois state line with the stolen car was a federal offense that put John Dillinger now under the jurisdiction of the little-known FBI. J. Edgar Hoover directed Chicago Bureau Chief Melvin Purvis to set up a special 40-man squad to the case. The news of Dillinger's daring escape from Crown Point made headlines the world over and brought comments from his father, who was glad to see his son out.
About John's escape from Crown Point, I think he just watched for a chance, and when he thought he had the chance come, I just made a break and was lucky enough to get away. I think luck is with him. And he wanted to get away because they're trying to make a mountain out of a molehill.
Having stayed in the mobster haven of St. Paul, Minnesota, Frechette and Dillinger made a sentimental journey here to the Mooresville farm to visit with his father and family one last time. As John Dillinger posed in these pictures with sisters Audrey, Doris, and Frances, brother Hubert, his father, and sweetheart Billy Frechette, he seemed relaxed and unconcerned that he was the most wanted man in America. He proudly showed off his wooden gun and a Thompson machine gun. On this day, where was the FBI or the state police to be found? Neighbors of the Dillinger family knew that the Mooresville farmhouse had been staked out by authorities all along.
When the FBI were trying to locate John, they had men stationed in my father's hayloft, focusing his father's farm was a half mile down the road.
The Little Bohemia Lodge in northern Wisconsin was remote enough to attract a revised Dillinger gang that now included trigger-happy Babyface Nelson. Resort owner Emo Winatka entertained the mobsters with card games. Dillinger joined in the poker playing, having an occasional Schlitz brew, his favorite beer. Mrs. Winatka tipped off the FBI, knowing full well that she had John Dillinger as a lodge guest. Melvin Purvis and a group of G-men went to the lodge to prepare an ambush. Unfortunately, some guests left the lodge and were mistaken for the mob and fired upon. Now alerted, the gang shot back in a hail of gunfire. Dillinger had once again escaped, and the FBI was left asking questions of their botched ambush. The gunfight at Little Bohemia saw the death of one federal agent, while 4 others were injured. Babyface Nelson was guilty of the agent's death. President Franklin Roosevelt was now calling for anti-crime legislation to allow FBI agents to chase down crooks across state lines. There was much talk for Hoover's resignation in light of recent events, John Dillinger having slipped away into the cool, dark night. Dillinger continued to be front-page news everywhere. With his mug shot on every cover and hunted by everyone carrying a gun or a club, Dillinger decided to take desperate action. He sought out the services of James Probosco to have plastic surgery performed on his face. About this time, Dillinger had plans to move to Mexico, but he needed money. On June 30th of 1934, he robbed a South Bend bank of almost $30,000. With less than 1 month to live, he would never realize his Mexican dream. Now the end was at hand. Dillinger had been staying with new girlfriend Polly Hamilton at the residence of Madame Anna Sage. Sage knew that she had Dillinger as a guest. She contacted Melvin Purvis and struck a deal that would prevent her deportation to Romania if she turned Dillinger over to the FBI. On the evening of July 22, 1934, not knowing that his life had been dealt away, Dillinger and the two ladies attend Manhattan melodrama, starring Clark Gable, at the Biograph Theater in Chicago. After the movie, the three walked out. Anna Sage wore an orange dress, yet she gets the reputation as the woman in red due to its appearance under the neon lights. Her dress is the signal to Purvis that it is indeed Dillinger with her. Purvis signals his agents to move in by shakily lighting a cigar. As Dillinger suspects the trap, he begins to flee, drawing his automatic. Agents fired, 4 bullets striking Dillinger. G-Man Charles Winstead is believed to have fired the fatal shot, having said that Dillinger spun like a top till he fell dead. John Dillinger's rampage of crime is now over. Women dip their handkerchiefs in his blood for souvenirs. His body is taken over to the Chicago morgue as hundreds file by to see the slain outlaw. But was the dead man really John Dillinger? Many in his hometown of Mooresville today believe that he was not gunned down at the Biograph, including his grandnephew.
I think that it's very possible that John did not die at the Chicago Biograph Theater. There was a motive in organized crime to have someone set up for John, and the motive that I believe was that they did not want a war between gangsters, the hit-and-run gangsters, and organized crime.
Well, they brought the body in from, they called them hearses, and they brought him back in what we called our embalming room and put him on the table. And John's father and my father-in-law and husband were both back there, and they looked at the whole body because his father wanted to be sure that it was John, and they all three decided that definitely it was John Dillinger.
He did have a very irregular hairline, rough kind of way it grew down. And my son used to pick up the newspapers and hand me a pencil and say, "Mom, draw this." So I drew a picture of him, and I had a little trouble getting that hairline in just right. But when we saw him, we went through the funeral home when he was there, and it was the same hairline, and that would be a little bit hard to copy, I would think. It didn't show any signs that part of it had been shaved or anything. And but I this business of them thinking that he's still alive, I think, is just like Elvis.
My wife and me waited 3 hours to get in to see him when they brought him home. And I stood there and looked at him, and that's him. That was him.
And what became of the John Dillinger gang? Ask them now if crime pays. August 23, 1934, Homer Van Meter is killed by St. Paul police officers after he refused to surrender. September 23rd, Charles Makeley is killed while attempting to escape a Columbus, Ohio prison while sitting on death row. October 17th, Harry Pierpont is electrocuted for the murder of Sheriff Jess Sarver. November 27th, Babyface Nelson is killed by FBI agents, but not until Nelson had killed both of them first. February 1960, Chicago Bureau Chief Melvin Purvis, in poor health, commits suicide, and Anna Sage, the lady in red, is deported back to Romania despite promises to the contrary. John Dillinger's stiff sentence for his first offense at 21 turned him away from society and towards hardened criminals who were ready teachers. His escapades made him a legend at a time when banks were making quick foreclosures and high interest rates. Dillinger was the folk hero, and the banks were the bad guys.
He's probably one man against the system with a lot of luck of both kinds. Bad luck thrust him perhaps into his role in the beginning. He was able to get away with what he did for a long time because of his good luck. But he was a man who was used certainly by the FBI to build their reputation, used by the press to build circulation. A man who was doomed from the very start, but certainly an interesting character who went down in American history as a very integral part of the Depression.
Many considered John Dillinger to be a Depression-era Robin Hood. During a different time, however, the romanticism about his life would not have been so sweet. After all, he was a crook and probably a killer. Yet he is a part of Indiana folklore and most certainly a part of Hoosier history. Until next time, I'm Rick Maultra.